Hey, good people. Welcome to the Evolving Education Project podcast, hosted by me, Dr. Tiffany M. Niachai, and friends, where we center the educational joys, passions, interests, and inquiries of people of color. This is episode 31, where my guests explore Black boyhood, diverse masculinities, and the role of educators in supporting the growth and development of Black boys. Our conversation highlights the richness of Black boyhood, the challenges posed by narrow societal expectations, and the need for kindness and community. We also discuss the importance of creating safe spaces for multiple forms of expressions while advocating for educational practices that honor the childhoods of Black boys, allowing them to thrive socially, emotionally, and academically. We would like to begin by shouting out the areas of our newest international listeners. We have new listeners in Merida, Yucatan, Singapore, Mexico City, Rome, Paris, and Amsterdam. We international. Hey. Our audience is growing, y'all, and we know it's because of word of mouth. Thank you. We appreciate y'all for pressing play and listening in your car, at the gym, on your walk, wherever. We've also just received another 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, and we are so grateful. Please continue to share this podcast with others. Additionally, I want to shout out one of our Spotify listeners, Jay Jones, who commented, "This the one," on episode 26, Interlude, Should We Abandon the Term People of Color as an Identifier? Jay Jones also commented on episode 25, The Work of Migazi, in the form of a heart emoji. Thank you, Jay Jones. We are so happy that you are feeling our conversations and the organizations we've been showcasing. I also want to shout out one of our listeners with the Instagram handle radical_radishes. Thank you for following us on Instagram and liking our posts. Only the real listeners know to do that. Wink, wink. Today marks the beginning of our new series, Black Boy Masculinities, Play, Literacies, and Black Male Teachers, which is inspired by Dr. Nathaniel Bryan's book, Toward a Black Boy Crit Pedagogy, Black Boys, Male Teachers, and Early Childhood Classroom Practices. For this episode, join us for The Gathering, part 1 of the series. For this gathering, I am in conversation with Richie Wills and Dr. Derrick Nelson. Richie Wills is a Nigerian-American writer, performance artist, and multidisciplinary artist pursuing a Master of Fine Arts in Prose with a certificate in film studies at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Richie's work explores themes of identity, queerness, and culture. Currently, he is working on his first novel with the goal of creating narratives that challenge and inspire readers. Dr. Derrick Nelson is a writer, teacher, educator, and sociologist of race, gender, and education. He is associate professor in the Department of Educational Studies at Swarthmore College, where he is also chair of the Black Studies program and affiliate faculty with the Gender and Sexuality Studies program. This is just a few of the many roles he holds. His research examines how schools can be what he calls reimaginative and liberatory institutions for Black children and youth, particularly Black boys during childhood and early adolescence. To date, his scholarship has been largely situated within single-gender schools and classrooms for Black and Afro-Latinx boys, and it has explored how race and gender stereotypes influence Black boys' identities and academic success in U.S. middle schools, specifically high-achieving Black boys from neighborhoods with concentrated poverty. Okay, let's listen in on our conversation. You both are just good human beings. Like, I just love people that are just like you're dope. Y'all both are super dope, do so many things, but like just at your core, just good human beings. Welcome.
Very exciting.
So good to be here. Thank you for having us and me. And it's always
being in community with all of you.
Yes. This is Richie's second time, I think. I think you were on in 2021.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Wow. What a year.
Yes. You have new hair now.
I do.
Yes. I'm so jealous of both of you. I have all this versatility with all of your looks. And I'm a one note, one trick pony, I guess.
Listen, you pull it off every time though, okay?
Yes.
Okay. And if somebody got something to say, you tell them come see me.
Okay, we'll do. I got you.
Yes. So how are y'all doing? We could just start off like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Y'all here on the Saturday morning, y'all. A Saturday committed.
Yes. I'm well. Only for you, Tiffany. Would I get up at the crack of dawn, shower and shave, and get my act together bright and early on a Saturday?
Yes.
In community with you. So thank you for the invitation. But I'm well. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, likewise. I woke up not too long ago, but we had our morning coffee, so we're ready to go. It's snowing. I'm in Massachusetts right now, and it's snowing outside. It's beautiful, but I'm happy that I'm in here with you all instead. So
yes, the snow is here. It's snowing here too. It's snow out. I do like it because my window by my desk, when it snows, the white of the snow is like so bright, and it gets me like, I want to do stuff now because the bright, like I feel like the bright like hits me from the reflection of the snow, and I'm like, I'm gonna write,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So I like that. Okay,
Absolutely.
I'm gonna jump in these questions, but I'm gonna tell y'all, like I tell everybody, we can let this go wherever way you want to go. This is your show. This is your conversation. I have my little questions, but if you twist them, throw it away, that's fine. If you want to revise it, okay? But mostly what I have right now is like thinking about Black boyhood, some different masculinities, welcoming different masculinities, Black boy play, and that's kind of direction I'm going in. But we could go however you want to go. And I'll probably, if you see me writing, it's because you said something that I want to ask about and I want to remember. So just a dialogue, jump in, interrupt. So my first starting question, and we'll see if it stays. Where did or do Black boyhoods with an S, that's Joseph's word, live for you? Like, where do they live for you? Where do they thrive for you? In what spaces, places, or people did they live? Maybe in the past when you were young, or even now, like in the past or today?
Do you want to start? I'll let you start, Joseph.
Sure. Well, I immediately get transported back to when I was a first grade teacher. So I grew up on the north side of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which was largely a Black and working poor neighborhood. And it was at a co-ed elementary school that had a single sex intervention by default for a group of primarily Black and Afro-Latinx boys. And the quick story there is that my principal had asked all of the kindergarten teachers to identify students that they thought could benefit from an early intervention, either with respect to their academic performance or their behavior or conduct at school. And by default, that list of students came back fully comprised of Black and Afro-Latinx boys, Black and Puerto Rican boys in particular. And the charge was clear. My principal was kind of well respected in the school district for being a turnaround school leader. And her charge was clear to me that I had to turn these boys around by third grade, or she would begin the special education referral process. So the stakes were high. And one thing I learned very quickly, and at least, addressing your question around their own boyhoods, is that, being a first year teacher, clumsily in hindsight, relationships with the boys became a window into reimagining who they are. Because a lot of what was shared with me about them were all these stories about this one can't keep his hands to himself. This one you need to put in the back by the corner by himself. He can't be in the front. He can't have any distraction around him. So all these just narratives that were shared with me about the boys I was going to inherit as a first grade teacher just were mired in these race and gender stereotypes about, adult Black men, not Black boys in particular. But I quickly learned through kind of leading with relationships, asking questions, seeking to understand their perspective and experience, that I quickly learned that oftentimes they were the furthest thing from or so much more than the narratives that were shared with me about them. And that there wasn't one boyhood, that there was like a diversity of boyhoods that existed, a wide range of interests and talents and gifts and abilities that I wanted to celebrate and give them an opportunity to explore and kind of grow in their own self-understanding, and not feel like they have to kind of adhere to this kind of troublemaker, up to something, difficult problem student that often gets imposed upon them. So I think for boyhoods, or Black boyhoods, life for me is just returning to that classroom with those 17 boys and just thinking creatively about how to optimally support their growth and the range of boyhoods that they represent.
I'm just going to say real quick in response to that, I did an awesome job inviting people because I didn't even know you were a kindergarten teacher before. Like, this is so perfect. I'm like, yes, oh gosh, I didn't even know this, because that's also part of the theme in, Black male teachers, which we'll talk about. I like to say Black men. I hate saying male, but anyway, I just say Black men teachers. But to hear you say all of that and that experience, and I like how you're bringing up about being a first year teacher and remembering that. So thank you for that. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. I think for me, I'm transported to the moment where in my young life as a young boy, I felt really seen and poured into by the role models that I was looking up to. We had this male teacher, his name was Mr. Yarborough, and he really emulated what it was like in the classroom to support students and to really give them the chance to shine, but while also highlighting what made us special. And I think he was the one for the first time that made me feel like I could really do anything, right? Like in the classroom. And what I really, really enjoyed about Mr. Yarborough is he didn't just do that in the classroom, he did that in and outside of the classroom. And so, there was this after school program that he was spearheading called the Young Men Leadership Program. And it was me and other Black boys, and we would gather and we would talk with each other. And he would facilitate these conversations where we really got to become intimate with ourselves, with our feelings, with our goals, what we wanted to achieve in school. We got to share work with each other. It was the first time I got to share poetry, which is the most nerve-wracking thing to do in front of like other Black boys. But that like I felt in that space the ability to be who I am and to share without judgment. And he created that space for us, right? So in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And so as I've kind of navigated different spaces and I've, working with Wakanda Alliance, and now I'm an instructor myself at University of Massachusetts, I always remember that moment of like, what is it like to create space for particularly Black male students to know that they have a space to be who they are without judgment. I think Black boyhood is so, when I think about that phrasing, it's like it's rich with imagination, kind of similar to what Joseph was saying. It's rich with wonder. And our job, at least I think of my job as an educator, is to protect that wonder, protect that imagination, and make sure that they see their worth, because that's what I was offered when I was young. To this day, that experience is so impactful. And so I try to pay that forward, right? Because I think that is our responsibility.
I think you're giving me a great question that both of you can answer. Thank you, Richie. How do you, I would say, maybe Joseph, how did you, during that time and in that program, protect Black boyhood and the wonder of it? And Richie, I would like to ask you, how do you do that? How do you recommend others do that? Like you said, the wonder of Black boyhood. I can talk about my Black boys that I taught. The boys that I taught, when I taught, I was a middle school teacher, and they separated them. It was a K-8 building. They separated them by gender in 7th and 8th grade because there was fights over this was her boyfriend and all that. So they separated them. So I had like an all-boy homeroom a couple of years, and I grew up with like all girls in the house. So, I was like, oh my God, like they just had a lot of energy, right? The boys that I had, one thing that we connected on is that we all were goofy. So I love that because I try to protect their play, their goofiness and their fun. And we had so much fun. So I want to hear from you all. How do you do that? How would you hope others do it? Or how did you do that as a teacher, Joseph?
Well, in my actual classroom with this cohort of 6 and 7-year-old boys, they couldn't help but be themselves because they are children. Right. Which is wonderful and great. And so there's a part of our role as classroom teachers to protect that childhood wonder and curiosity and joy. And it was mostly my colleagues, other teachers in the building, that had expectations for them in terms of how they needed to conduct themselves and how they needed to show up in school. And a lot of that just came from a place of management and control and quarantine of their bodies rather than, teaching and learning and development as children. So the boys that I inherited as my students, they all had reputations, so to speak, or again, a host of narratives or stories that were told about them. So I felt in large part my task was to offer from my experience with them in my classroom a counter narrative where they're exhibiting success or where they're exercising their own brilliance and their own kind of intellectual curiosity about the world and even their expression of kindness towards one another. That, I felt that my task in that particular school was to offer these counter narratives to other teachers who will eventually inherit them as their students. And one thing we know through the research is that reputation carries with them. It's hard to undo. And so as much as I could possibly do in my role as a classroom teacher with my other colleagues of celebrating these boys, uplifting their gifts and talents, so then that other teachers can see them for who they really are, which is a child with all of the same hopes and dreams and aspirations as all children. So, it was my protection efforts came with offering counter narratives to my colleagues.
Yeah, beautiful. I absolutely think that's so important, is to offer those counter narratives too. And I think sometimes what that can lead to is other colleagues and teachers and educators really confronting some implicit biases that might exist, right? Yeah, I think another thing that I think about often too is even now in my own classrooms is how can I be culturally responsive in this moment to really engage and connect with my students. I think oftentimes we get these prescribed kind of curriculum, and it's like, how can I add and enhance it to be culturally relevant for my students? Because bringing those culturally relevant stories can also be a way to connect with them, right? What are the things that they're interested in? What are the books or literature or whatever other media that reflect their lives that they can really see themselves in, that also empowers them to see their own identities and also empowers them to engage in the classroom on a much deeper level. And so I think that's something I often think about, is how can I make the classroom more culturally relevant for my students, and for the conversations that we're having, for their engagement with each other, for their engagement with text or whatever it is that we're learning together. And that's one way that I found that they really, like for instance, I had added a recent essay to my curriculum, which is Bell Hooks's A Place Where the Soul Can Rest, which is a really, really fantastic short essay that I always enjoy. And I found that to be really engaging for so many of my students who had never really encountered bell hooks before. But that really kind of simple idea of the porch space as a political space really broke open conversations that we were having that we wouldn't have been able to otherwise with prescribed curriculum. So just thinking of ways to kind of enhance the classroom, it doesn't matter what kind of age group you're working with, but what are some culturally responsive things that we can do as educators to get our students engaged?
I really appreciate I think the toll of educators when you have to always prove that these Black boys are worthy, are not monsters, are not like, when I had my Black boy homeroom, they had a checklist that they had to go around. All of the classes did. My class was always the bad class. Like they're bad. And these boys were, when I tell you these boys were not bad at all, like wasn't doing nothing but being silly. Like nothing. Like really very smart, very into the lesson. I was a social studies teacher. They would use their whole bodies to respond to. I was like, oh, you got to get up and stand because I told you, but that fact, okay. And it was so exhausting, like always trying to prove to people like they're not bad or like they're not a threat. I remember, I may have said this on another episode, but I think it applies here. I remember I was walking with 3 of my boys in the hall because they had to do some work for me. So I said, come on, y'all gonna do this work. Y'all owe me this assignment, right? So we walking in the hall, and I could see one of my white male colleagues like face getting, he's coming this way, we're coming this way. They're not thinking about him. They're talking to me and we got to do this and Miss Nietzsche and we gonna blah, 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 blah. And he's like, his face is like getting red. He's getting more uncomfortable. And this is somebody who been in the school for years, I think before me. So you saw them grow. These boys have been here since they were in kindergarten. So you saw them grow up from kindergarten all the way. You're so afraid, like they're such a threat to you right now. And it bothered me. And it's like, I just feel like the task and the double labor of always trying to get them to see them fully, and that they're not a threat. These are beautiful. If you take the time to know them, they're beautiful, beautiful students and wonderful and kind. Like I love how you talked about, I would love to hear more about like the multiple ways that they show kindness, because I do think like the kindness is different. I love y'all, but I love my Black girls, but the kindness is just something, it's very simple. It's very like, not for everyone, but like the ways I've experienced it. But why don't we talk about that and why it bothers me that you can't even see it? I think that's what breaks my heart is like, how do you not see this? Like, how do you not see this beauty, this kindness, this fun? Like, and it frustrates me because I feel like in pop culture, like you use their language, everything they add to the culture, like they're dancing, they're even if we, not to limit Black boys to athletes, but like even what athletes offer the culture, like in their ways of like doing and being and stuff, but then you can't see the beauty in this Black boy that's right in front of you, right? And you can't see the range and the beauty. And I don't know what y'all think about that. I was thinking about all of that.
Great. Well, it would be in the simplest of ways that they would show kindness to one another. It's if someone forgot to push in their seat as we're lining up to go outside for recess, they would make a point to push in their friend's chair. I think it was funny that when anyone lost something, it was stolen. That was the reference for it. Someone stole my pencil when it actually just fell on the floor and it's under your desk and he can't see it. So, it becomes, no, man, it's under your seat. So, and then also, even catching myself and how, in the culture is just like little man or man, like our language, even in terms of how we refer to young Black boys, we have to like undo a lot of that, and remind ourselves that they are in fact children, not men. And that's important for us to kind of be mindful of as we support their success. But, outside at recess, if someone is on the bottom of the mountain of people playing football, that they're concerned with one another. And, it's just these simple ways that they show kindness on a regular basis, that they're friends and not the posturing that typically, kind of the culture of boyhood and masculinity does, that they're all in competition, that they're trying to one up one another, and became more of a community of support rather than a competition to the top of the kind of boyhood hierarchy.
Yeah. I really love what you just said, Joseph, about like that being a community of support, because what it's also doing, it's reframing that narrative, right? It's like Black boys, young Black boys in particular, their energy can often be seen as a problem instead of like, there's so much potential here. There's so much happening here that is good if we reframe the narrative to, instead of being, punitive, how about we celebrate this creativity, celebrate this joy, celebrate this energy, reframe what's happening here, because like you said, it is a community of support and they're finding ways to engage with each other that is beautiful inherently, rather than to be seen as this like problematic. They got too much energy, they running all over the place, they doing this, they doing that. But it's like, why don't we use this as a learning moment for these young Black boys? So yeah, I think I like that you're reframing that to make it a positive impact for them.
And the quick example I can share there too, like in an elementary school classroom, if they're doing a volcano experiment and, there's a first grader bopping around in their chair, excited about the novelty of being able to participate in this experience, that one teacher sees that bouncing around excitement as a threat to the volcano. He's going to topple it over. We got to put them in the back, as opposed to thinking creatively about how to harness that excitement and energy or kind of intellectual curiosity around this novel experiment and support their success. And how can they kind of harness some of that energy to support all students learning in this moment?
Absolutely. I love that, because it's also like, how are we reading the behaviors of Black boys? Mm-hmm. How do you interpret their behaviors? Because I think you and I would look at it like, oh, he's just excited. He's really into a lesson. Somebody else will be like, oh my God, he's misbehaving. I'm like, no, he's not. Like, he's paying attention. Like,
yes.
I'm glad you have a response to what I just said. Thank you.
Yes.
I because we need some feedback as teachers. I'm like, that's interesting to you? Oh, good. They encourage me. I look at them and I'm like, okay, keep going. All right. So thinking about, you kind of brought this up a little bit. I really, really appreciate how masculinities are like seeping into the conversation. It was going to come. Right. And I really appreciate, Joseph, how you like corrected yourself. Like, oh yeah, I'm saying man and little man, and I have to watch that. Because I see that a lot with boys. I've seen that with my boy cousins, like, you got to be the man of the house. And it's like, he's 12. Like, why you got to be the man of the house? Like, please stop, And it's a lot of undue pressure. And then what happens is, I feel like in schools is like, we adultify them, but I think they get adultified in a different way than girls get adultified. It's like that they have to be these fully grown, responsible, perfect old men, and they 10 and 11. And it's like, that's a lot. Like, we don't act like that as adults, right? But we expect all of this from Black boys. Like, they can't, I just feel like sometimes they just can't even just exist. Yeah. And sometimes I will see young, oh, go ahead. Were you going to say something, Joseph?
No, they just can't be. We don't let them, we don't allow them to express their own humanity.
Yeah. And it's like, sometimes I can see it in, now that I teach the college level, and sometimes I might get a Black male student every now and then, and I can see them like the pressure of having to hold in and not be who you are. And now you're in this super white university space and you're a Black, and I'm always like, hi. Like, come on, open up. How you doing? Like, come on. Yeah. Because I know that is a lot. You can see it. So I will say this question: why is it important for us? I know that y'all know this. This is a baby question for y'all, but for the audience, we want to hear from y'all perspectives of this. But why is it important for us to welcome diverse masculinities among Black boys and Black men?
Yeah, oh my gosh, this is such an important question. And I think too that part of it is that masculinity, particularly and young Black boys, it doesn't have to be a cage or a prison. It doesn't have to mean conformity, right? It can be a place to explore, to express, navigate emotions like anger and sadness and joy with confidence. I think, oftentimes, like, well, we might, I'm sure we've all heard, like, the phrase man up. But it's like, why don't we transition that phrase into open up? What does it mean to open up, right? And so masculinity doesn't have to be this thing where it's machismo and it's trying to one up one another, but it's a way to open up to each other. I also think too that, like, as educators and as teachers, that we can also emulate that, like, different kinds of masculinity, right? Because they're also looking up to us. They're emulating us as, like, role models for them as well. And so I often ask myself, like, how am I showing up in the classroom? Because that's what they're also going to be watching and emulating. And so I always think about what I'm saying and how I'm moving and how I'm talking about my own emotions, right? How I'm expressing myself to get them to understand that there can be confidence in being able to open up and express yourself. Yeah. So I think that's one way that I think about that in the classroom, is how am I emulating that myself for them? But also that, like, masculinity, again, does not have to be a cage. Like I said earlier, like, we had this teacher who really taught us that, who did that for us, who showed us what it meant to have masculinity that was more about lifting each other up and not tearing each other down. And I held that deeply. And so I think if we're emulating that, they really are learning from that experience, and it really will impact how they navigate their own relationships, how they navigate their academics, how they navigate their families. And it's a domino effect, right? And it oftentimes can also start from us as educators too.
And what I would add is the norms of masculinity and boyhood, it's a culture that's very pervasive to this day. And we're still in the same place in terms of these norms of masculinity being rooted in physical toughness, being strong, being athletic, emotional stoicism, regulating your emotions, limiting yourself to, anger, or even kind of independence and autonomy, one that I personally struggle with. I can do it on my own. I can stand on my own 2 feet. I don't need anyone's help. That those kind of norms are still pervasive to this day. And it's a part of a culture that we've created in the American context and even throughout the world, that it genders behaviors that are fundamentally human. And that for young boys, it requires them to compromise parts of their humanity to adhere to these norms that ultimately are unattainable and actually harm them as they get older. Like, there's a host of research now that speaks to the more aligned, boys and males are to these norms of masculinity, the greater harm it is to their social and psychological and emotional well-being, in their adulthoods. So creating a school environment, a classroom setting where there's a wider range of expression of who they are that can be permitted and celebrated. And then when they understand, or they have a deeper understanding of themselves, they're better able to see the world for what it is, a world that imposes a set of stereotypes and expectations and norms on young boys and men, rather than an archetype that they must spend the rest of their life trying to attain.
Right.
And then they're better equipped to kind of navigate the world with greater agency. They can make choices about who they want to be or understand themselves to be, which is part of the life journey. That we need more schools and classrooms that allow for more wider range of expression of humanity, rather than yet another context in, boys and young men's lives where these stereotypes are imposed upon them. It should be a place of possibility and discovery, rather than yet another institution that's kind of imposing these norms on them.
Yeah. And, I hear toxic masculinity, and I feel like we've probably heard it so many times, and it's become this, like, nebulous phrase because it means so many different things now. But, when I think of the opposite of that, of, like, positive masculinity, I think of really advocating for fostering kindness and empathy and collaboration. And so I think those things itself can be great in the classroom, right? Like, we were talking about kindness earlier. Joseph had brought up that really great example. But those are very tangible ways that we can instill those positive masculine kind of tendencies in our young Black boys. Is really, as simple as, like, how are we teaching kindness in the classroom? How are we teaching empathy in the classroom? And how are we allowing them to collaborate with each other versus, I can do this all on my own. It's, let's collaborate with each other, and creating a narrative that rather than boys will be boys, it's boys will be kind, boys will be curious, boys will be courageous. And this can happen happen in the classroom, right? So, again, it's about lifting each other up, lifting themselves up, not tearing themselves down.
How do you see what they're already displaying and how are you reading how they be? Like, because I also think like some of this stuff they are doing. They don't need you to teach them. Some stuff we need to see and we need to read it and we need to welcome it and we need to notice it and attend to it and provide space where they can be that, where it's welcome and it's seen, because the kindness and even like the collaboration and looking out for each other and looking out for you and, like the care that is there that you don't notice. Like I remember actually I was doing a Black girlhood program at the school and one of my students, Black boy, we said, come, can you help us pass out the snacks to the classroom? He said, yeah. He was walking around. I said, come over and get this. And he said, yeah, I'll pass them out. So he helping us for the program. Like even just that, like how they supported the girl program, like we would call them, they would help us and do all that. Yeah, we need you. So he's passing out the snacks to the classroom, and so it was this one teacher, she was in the class working and he went in there and he like yelled in the room or something, like he did something like, hey, like that, and kept walking. White teacher. So she comes over to us, the three of us Black women teachers who he's helping us out. She's like, I just want to let you know, I know you have so-and-so helping you with the snacks, but I did do theater, so just let me like this. She turned it into another person. I did, and I just want to make you aware that, he yelled in my room and you might not want to have him helping you with the snacks anymore because it doesn't seem like he can handle it. So she left. Now, why she came to three Black women teachers and said that and left us together. And so we like talking about this and like, like, what is this? He ain't even doing nothing. Like, blah, 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 blah. We ain't got time for this. So I decided, I was younger and I had a lot more grace. I said, I'm going to have a conversation with her. I told them, I was like, I'm going to talk to her. And I said, I don't think he was trying to be a problem. I said, how I read from him is that he actually was building a relationship with you. And he actually thinks you're kind of cool or whatever. When they do that, what we consider to be bothering, like the picking at you while you in your room on your lunch break, that's showing love. That's showing respect. That's showing like, I don't read those behaviors in that way. And she gets all red and stuff. And, but then later on she came to me and was like, I understood, but it's like, why are you reading that negative? Like, like, I don't know. It's just that type of stuff. And then you coming and bothering, like tattling on him to us. And we looking at you like, it's just so like, it's that type of stuff that is just like so annoying, like for a 12-year-old. And so thinking about, I don't even remember where I was going with that. I had a reason for sharing that story.
Yeah, I think we talked about how to recognize those moments when they have.
Oh, yes. I said, why did I tell that story? Yes, like how you could read that moment, right? And misread a moment and misread an interaction with Black boys that is not that. He's not acting up. He's actually saying, hey, what's up? That's really what he was doing while he was delivering the snacks. It's just like, okay, so I want to talk about Black boy play. And I don't know what way you want to go through this because, I am talking about things being misread. I also think like their play is misread, right? And even at ages where you would expect young children, adolescents to be playing, they're not allowed to play. Like, it's like such a problem. And it's like, even the way their play is always read as like being a problem or violent or a threat. And I'm like, they're playing, right? So how would you describe Black boy play and what are your thoughts about it right now or experiences?
It's a tough reality because of what you led with. Their play is perceived as a threat and a problem to be managed. So it becomes, how then do we as teachers of young Black boys make space for their play and do the work of helping our colleagues honor and respect their play and see it as part of their learning and optimal development, and even just be creative about how to support their play. And we're still, unfortunately, in a place where their play gets perceived as disruption. And it's in the minds of teachers that see it that way. So in a lot of my own research, the greatest harms in education for young Black boys is discipline policy and, the special education referral processes and teacher expectations and teacher perspectives. So, those are the aspects of education that are inflicting the most harm on boys. And I think in this kind of arena of play, it's teachers' expectations that we got to figure out ways to kind of undo and chip at. So then they can see them as the children they are And as they do with all of their children and students, think about how to use that play to support their learning and be creative about what types of play can be introduced into the classroom that some students or all children will find themselves gravitating for. So it's the unfortunate reality is that their play is still seen as a disruption or a problem. It resides in teacher expectations. And so then how can we help our colleagues be creative about harnessing their play for their own learning and development as they do with all of their other children? That's, early childhood education and teacher preparation and these stages of development. All that you learn pedagogically is about harnessing play.
Play. They have whole classes on play.
Yes, exactly.
Well, Black boys can't play.
Yeah. I feel like you put it so perfectly. And I'm going to just say this, particularly as early childhood educators, one phrase that I come back to is play is a radical act of freedom, particularly for young Black boys.
Yeah.
And I think it should be we need to remind ourselves of that, right? You said the classroom can be a place for that. And, you had mentioned kind of letting boys be boys, letting them be kids. And there's this adultification of young Black boys. Like we want them to grow up so fast, but no, let's push back. Let's have counter narrative to that, right? Let's let them be kids, let them be boys. And the classroom can be a place for play in a world that demands that they grow up too fast, right? So yeah, that was really well put, Joseph.
And even for early childhood educators that look like us, some of the urgency is I must prepare them for a world that's going to harm them. And that kind of contributes to their adultification. When in fact, kind of what I argue in my own research around reimagining Black boyhood is that the best way to prepare them for the world that they're going to very well encounter is by protecting their childhood and protecting their play so that they have a strong sense of themselves going out into the world to where they can, again, see the world for what it is, that has a kind of set of expectations and stereotypes placed on them. And they can resist and challenge that through a kind of secure understanding of themselves, through their education. So it comes from a place of care and concern and urgency. But in fact, what we're just suggesting is to channel that urgency towards protective efforts.
Yes. Yeah. And that makes me think of when Black boys are playing, they're not just having fun, right? They're imagining futures where they're limitless. They're imagining futures where they're powerful. They're imagining futures where they're unrestrained from all these barriers of society that have been placed upon them already. And so how are we kind of looking at that play, to your point, Joseph, and enhancing it or using it to also add to their learning objectives, right? And not just shutting it down, but actually using play as a way to enhance what they're doing in the classroom. And I think that's so important, is to allow that space to play. They don't have to grow up so fast. There's already a world that wants them to. Let boys be boys. Let them be playful. Let them engage with each other and also watch how they're engaging with each other. And I think this is a moment where as educators, we can use this as a dynamic way to engage them in the classroom, right? It's contextual. People play differently. How are we watching what is happening and using that as a way to engage them as well, rather than just breaking it and stopping it, which is really detrimental and damaging.
Yes, they are creating future worlds. They are reimagining their futures. Here they are. Even sometimes I would see my Black boy cousins take, what's those things that you wrap around, the twist ties around the bread?
Oh, yes, the wire.
The wire thing that you twist the bread. I had an older cousin that used to take those and make little men and play just to himself. And I used to be like, okay. When I was a little girl, I remember him playing by himself, and they would have little things going on, and it was very serious, and I didn't need to touch it, but he had to, and it's they're always creating and imagining, and these are the same skills that I feel will protect them, will help them to be the adults, the better adults, right? Yeah. That you're trying to push them to be, will protect them in the future. Play is a place where they can practice dealing with the real world and navigating the world, and we need to protect that space and like we've been saying, let them be, just let them be. Okay, I have one more question. I had two, but I'm only gonna ask one more because I'm gonna see where y'all go with this before I can watch the time. What is your hope for Black boys and Black boyhoods?
That's such a good question. I think one of the things that I think about is the right to exist, to be given the opportunities and the space to explore who they are, especially from a young age, I think that allows so much more opening up as they grow up and as they kind of move and navigate different contexts and different spaces, is giving them the space to really explore and express. And like we were talking about, to play in an environment where they are supported, they're seen, and, without fear or judgment or interruption. And so my hope, that is my greatest hope, is that they can be in spaces with good educators, good mentors who believe in who they are, who allow them to express who they are, and who also pour and instill into them that they can be limitless, right, in any space that they are in. I think that's really most of it. And I think that their childhoods are preserved, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that their right to dream, their right to dream is honored in the classroom, it's honored out of the classroom. And that is my biggest hope, I think.
Yes, and similar to Richie, I too think that Black boys deserve a childhood. And my greatest hope for them is that become a reality. And my hope for, education is just that it becomes context in Black boys' lives where Black boys are seen as able to teach us something about childhood, because most of how Black boys are talked about is an aberration from the norm or the normative development of children. They're often a side table or graph or positioned as, again, a deviation from the norm. But actually, if we, become curious about Black boys as we are with all children, ask questions from a place of curiosity, listen and seek to understand their perspective, we learn so much more about them, and they can teach us about what it means to be a child and child development and childhood. That I think we're still a world that doesn't think that Black boys can teach us anything. And so I want to challenge that by asking all of us as educators to ask young boys what they think, how they feel, how they view the world, and see that as valuable insights to kind of reimagine childhood and child development so that our developmental models are more robust. They can deal or grapple with the complexity of childhood and childhoods more so than now, because so much of how education seeks to kind of group and categorize and rank and sort students are based upon a norm that hasn't adequately integrated the wonderful aspects of childhood that Black boys can teach us. That would be my kind of greatest hope.
Yeah. And can I add one more thing that I was just thinking about as Joseph was speaking is, and I don't know if this is directly answering the question, but one thing I think about too is, again, like how impactful having a Black male teacher was for me as a young Black boy, and how we need more, right? I one of my most fervent hopes is for more Black male teachers in the classrooms, because I think there's a crazy statistic that's like less than 1% of elementary and early education public school teachers are Black men, which I think is so insane. And so, that is one of my greatest hope, is that young Black boys can see themselves reflected in the education system more frequently, and how that can have a lasting impact on them and their development as well in the classroom and outside the classroom. So that's one. I don't know if that directly answers the question, but that's one thing that I really, really hope for.
Yeah,
Can you imagine going to school and having Joseph as your teacher? Oh my God. I'd have been like, can I be in his class, please? Still with the glasses.
You are too kind, but I was the only Black male elementary school teacher in my building. I think there was one other Black male teacher, but he was in fourth grade, which is like kind of a whole year. Again, what happens to Black male teachers is they get taken out of the classroom, or they get placed in the grades or years that historically have been known as troublesome or problematic or important transitions. So here I was in a first grade classroom with 17 boys of color that were all labeled troublemakers, and turned them around again by third grade became what I experienced, and how much I would have enjoyed that experience more, knowing that there were other colleagues in the building that looked like me and viewed the boys in the ways that I did. So I didn't feel as alone in my classroom.
And we need to think about that so we could keep and retain. And you're more than a disciplinarian. You are a pedagogue.
Yes.
That's what that sounds like. What you described is like, come here and get these kids together. But, but no, I care about curriculum. Black male teachers care about curriculum and learning
Yes.
and teaching,
Mhm.
and intellectualism and all of that. I think that also gets lost.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was, even, I had my students, but then there was me as a Black male teacher, and even how I was viewed by other teachers and how I needed to show up in that classroom,
Yes.
to be order. If they were seated in their desks and silent and on task, I was an effective teacher. Who cares if the kids actually liked me as a person or wanted to be in my classroom, but as long as they respected me, was the task. And as you just shared, Tiffany, in the first 5 minutes of meeting me as a person, I'm the furthest thing from all of those things.
Yes.
I couldn't even be that if I tried. And if I tried, I would fail miserably.
Right.
I had no choice but to be myself. And again, if students are learning and they're demonstrating progress, no one comes for you.
Yeah.
That's right.
No.
That's right. You just keep going. Leave me alone, because you see them grades and you see what they're doing. So leave me alone.
The results speak for themselves.
We're learning over here.
Right. That's what we're doing, because that's what school is. I don't know what you thought. Right. That's what we're doing. Any final thoughts you want to leave us with?
I think this is such an important conversation, and thank you for creating the space for us to have this conversation. And I hope that it happens more frequently, because it's important. Our young Black boys will grow up and go into different areas of the world, and like this developmental moment is where so much of their lives start. So many of the early relationships can start as well. And so, again, and I'll continue to say, like, play is a radical freedom for Black boys. And I'm glad that we were able to talk about that and how important it is to allow the classroom to be a space where they can learn and grow and build really healthy relationships with each other, but also with the teacher as well, like how that can be lasting and impactful. So thank you for the opportunity to have that conversation.
And I would conclude with how my colleague Michael Dumas and I argue in our framework around reimagining Black boyhood is that Black boys should be permitted the opportunity to play, cry, pout, and be just as silly and frivolous as all children. And those behaviors not be seen as a threat or an impediment to their academic success. And we should strive to create a classroom, school world where Black boys can be, and we can harness all of the great contributions that Black boys will make as they become and grow into young Black men, that they're seen as a contributor to our society rather than a problem to be managed.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
How do you pronounce your last name?
It's Teac. My husband is Kenyan.
Okay. Wonderful.
Yes. And I hope sometimes I still... Sometimes, because I think Americans go Teac. So like my people and stuff, when I got married and I was working in a school with Black kids, they would be like, "Hi, Mrs. Teac." But Deuce, me and Deucey, he says Teac. Like it's like a different, it's like the is quicker. Yeah. Americans say Teac, and he says Teac like that.
Yes.
Like, so.
Well, I'm glad I asked.
Yes.
And it was so wonderful to see you again.
It's wonderful to see you
having me.
Yes. You keep being awesome. I'm watching you from afar. I'm so proud, and I'm just celebrating you from afar always.
And it was so wonderful to meet you, Joseph. I hope that we can connect again.
Yes.
Absolutely. Pleasure to meet you as well, Richie. Again, You guys make me jealous that I can't grow hair. But
but look at that skin, honey. The skin is skinny, honey. Okay.
It's really giving.
I so enjoyed this gathering with Richie and Joseph. And there are so many insights that I am sitting with right now. Richie urges us to view Black boyhood as rich with wonder. And Joseph describes boyhoods, plural, as a wide range of interests, talents, gifts, and abilities that should be celebrated. Moreover, we protect Black boys by protecting their childhoods, play, and their authentic existence so that, according to Joseph, they have a strong sense of themselves. We also ensure that they have access to Black men as teachers or just a part of their village. Moreover, Richie reminds us that for Black boys and Black men, masculinity can be a place to explore, express, and navigate emotions as opposed to conformity. Thank you for listening to part 1 of our Black Boy Masculinities, Play, Literacy, and Black Male Teachers series. If something from this episode resonates with you, please share it with others and let us know via social media or through our website, evolvingeducationproject.com. The essay mentioned in this episode will be linked in the show notes. Be sure to tune in for part 2 next Wednesday. Trust, you do not want to miss it. To find out more about the Evolving Education Project, to write in, or to join our listserv, check us out at evolvingeducationproject.com. And please subscribe to this podcast and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We will be phasing away from X, but we are going to be starting a new account on Bluehost. So if you have Bluehost, please follow us there. If you can only choose one, please follow us on Instagram and love all of our posts. Support that doesn't cost a dime. If you've been enjoying our podcast, you can also support us by writing a review. 5-star along with favorable written reviews help more educators, organizers, families, communities, and activists find us. We hope to continue to cultivate an authentic audience and community. We want you to help us to evolve over time and shape what this could be. Now that you know what we're about, let us know what you want to learn more about, authors that you would like us to interview, discussions you would like to have. Okay, that's all for now, good people. We out.